Everybody, Jennifer Schaus here, coming to you live from Washington, D.C., and thanks for joining us in our webinar today. Happy New Year to everybody. This is the beginning of the federal government fiscal new year. It's obviously October 1st, and we've got a great lineup today. It's a mix of both government and industry, and we're going to hear about best practices, and we've got it segmented by topic. So we're going to dig into some of our slides here. We don't take questions throughout the webinar, but it is being recorded. We'll send out the recording as well as the link to the slides later this afternoon once we're able to convert the recording into a MP4 file. So before we get started, just want to tell you a little bit about us. We're based in downtown Washington, D.C., and provide a variety of services for companies that are selling to the federal government. We don't deal with state and local or education, just the federal market. And so our clients typically come to us for anything from market analysis reports, business development. If it makes sense for them, we'll help them get onto the GSA schedule and manage that contract. And then also that post-award kind of back office compliance is another piece of our service. We do have a newsletter that goes out every Monday, which is perhaps how you found out about the event today. And that reaches over 23,000 subscribers, most of which I'd say 90% are probably government contractors or are government contractors. We've got some service providers and then some government personnel as well who are subscribers. We've been putting webinars on for several years, and so we now have a library of over 450 complimentary government contracting webinars, and they cover topics on anything from GSA schedules to business development, and then a lot of the legal pieces such as bid protest, FOIA requests, a little bit of everything. So you can check out all of our recordings there on the YouTube channel. What we did in, just to rewind for a moment, in 2020, we covered every part of the FAR, which is the Federal Acquisition Regulation, and those were run through sequentially. So we started with FAR Part 1 in the first part of January and then ended with FAR Part 52 in December. This year, 2021, which has flown by, we're kind of mirroring that process, and we're covering the DFARs. Those are Wednesdays at 12 o'clock, complimentary, so we're more than halfway through that series. If you want to listen to any of the recordings, you can find them on our website as well as our YouTube channel. We've also got the second Friday of every month, a new, well, it was new for this year, which is the GovCon Live Q&A Cafe. It's the second Friday of every month. There is a small fee to attend, which is $35. If you use the discount code DFARS, you'll get a $15 discount. Next Wednesday, we wanted to mention we do have a special, it's complimentary webinar in our COVID contracting series, and it's the vaccination guidelines for contractors and subcontractors, which recently just came out. So you can find that link to register on our website under the event section. Next year, we're covering, in the same spirit as the FAR and the DFARs, the FAR supplements. It's a webinar series. We're going to have primarily government contracts attorneys who will go through basically the agency and the department nuances that they have within their own department or agency regarding contracting and procurement. And then on that corresponding Friday, we'll have the department and agency playbook series. We're doing that in conjunction with FedMine, Archiza Meehan, and their group. So they're going to cover some of the opportunities. We're also doing this in conjunction with the McLean Group, which is a merger and acquisition outfit, and we will have government representation on most of those webinars as well. Sponsorships are available. One more thing I wanted to note is a new series we're going to launch is called the GIP. It's the Government Industry Partners. And so basically it allows you to conduct a webinar with us. We will help promote it, help you curate it. We're going to host it, we'll record it, and then we'll post your webinar on our website, YouTube channel, So you can do this as a 1, 2, or 3-part series, and so this will be all about your business. So it's like today you'll present in front of a live audience, and as I mentioned, you get the recording, the registration list. So if you're targeting government contractors, this is probably a good service for you. And I want to make sure that hopefully everybody can see my screen. And so again, that service, this Government Industry Partners webinar series, is allowing you to conduct a webinar with us. Okay, just to let you know, next Friday is this GovCon Live Q&A Cafe series that I mentioned. So every month is a different topic. Next Friday is covering set-asides. With the folks here you see on your screen, most people that are in the government contracting sector are probably familiar with these names. And then in November, the second Friday is November 12th, and we will cover pricing. And Marcia, I believe, is joining us later today as we talk about best practices for pricing. And then we'll round out December with mergers and acquisitions with these 4 panelists. You can sign up on our website for all of these. So just go to our website, go to the GovCon Live Q&A tab, and you'll find the links there to register. Okay, and our last session here is on compliance, which is obviously a very important piece of government contracting. Bill Wooten over at C3, who is one of our sponsors and a newsletter advertiser for us as well. Bill, it's great to have you with us. I'm sure your best practices here are centered around CMMC, so I'm going to give you the floor.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yep.
Great, awesome. So for us as a technology provider, when we talk about compliance, we're really talking about cybersecurity compliance. As anyone who works with the DoD knows, CMMC is very much kind of on the topic and on the mind of everyone. So this is going to be framed a little bit around the idea of CMMC and a CMMC program. Number one is, as a contractor, you need to think about investing in cybersecurity. Before you get to the point of talking about compliance, you need to recognize that cyber is an important part of your business. Just like benefits are part of payroll and overall compensation, marketing is part of sales and overall business development, cyber is part of your IT and your overall ability to perform and do anything as an organization. So it's really about having the mindset that cybersecurity is here to stay, and it needs to be part of your budgeting, your culture, everything you do in your organization. Getting into a little bit around the CMMC place, first things first is number 2 here, do your 800-171 self-assessment. If you are doing work with the DoD, if you are expecting to win awards with the DoD, you're going to be asked for that SPRS score. You're going to need to upload it. It is something that needs to be done if you're going to continue or try to start doing work with the DoD. Also, number 3, use the results of that assessment to build your roadmap. POAM may not be the right word, but you're not going to get a perfect score. No one's expecting a perfect score in that self-assessment at this point with SPRS. Use that exercise to truly and honestly identify your gaps, where you need to improve, and where you need to put work in to gradually improve that score. 4th, start looking at your subcontractors. Clause 7020, if you're doing work with the with defense and the DFARS 7020 clause, requires you to go validate your cyber security of your subcontractors. That is as easy as kind of getting their SPRS score today, but more and more we're seeing folks that are prime contractors ask much more than that. Where are you with 800-171A, and very pointed questions around, have you deployed MFA, conditional access, monitoring, those types of things. We're starting to see that more and more as a trend. And then the final best practice is start somewhere. If you're an organization that has not invested in cyber, start from a technology approach. Get your technology in place, get your network in place, work on your cybersecurity, and lock your environment down. If you've made those investments, then you can probably move forward to some form of a gap assessment, whether that's internal or from a third party, to really measure where you stand.
Okay, and thank you. Bill, I appreciate those good points on compliance. And as the overall CMMC program seems to be stalled, what should contractors do now?
Yeah, and I think it's easy to have a perception that the CMMC program has stalled a little bit. In a lot of ways, it has. I think we're going to see that start to shake up as we get towards the end of the year. The DoD has signaled that their reviews are going to wrap up by the end of the year. They've left open the fact that there may be some changes, but even if there are some changes, don't expect that to deviate far from 800-171. That's already embedded in your DFAR 7012 clause. So most of the work that you can do today just get you closer and closer to being ready when that compliance audit shows up. We're also starting to see the CMMC AB board approve their learning partner, which means that they will start rolling out classes, and that will really accelerate the ecosystem. So everything that I just said in terms of walking through, starting your assessment, using the results as a roadmap to make improvements, start validating your subs, start asking them the hard questions. Those are all the things you can do now so that as CMMC matures, you're ready and you're just making minor adjustments instead of being caught flat-footed.
Great, thank you so much. Appreciate you guys sponsoring the event, and always good to have you on our programs, and great information on CMMC. So thank you, Bill.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Great. All right, next up we've got Heather Teed, a well-known name in government contracting. Heather, it looks like you are on the line, so I'm going to move over to your best practices.
Great, thank you so much. So now is a great time for everyone to look at your annual compliance refresher training. Not only your ethics, your export control, training around False Claims Act or Foreign Corrupt Practices Act or Truthful Cost or Pricing Act, Procurement Integrity or International Traffics in Arms, but also think about your business systems, such as your estimating and procurement system processes and procedures. You really want to make sure you take some time to help your teams working on proposals, make sure you've trained them on how to develop a strong basis of estimate and how to effectively justify your rationale for the selection of subcontractors, the materials, the equipment, and other direct costs that you're putting into your proposals and why those prices are reasonable and realistic. It's also a good time to do internal audits of your business systems and refresh your manuals, your processes and procedures, and update any of your compliance refresher training. Another thing that's important to do right now is just many of you will be in strategic planning right now, and so while you're in your strategic planning processes for your next fiscal year, you should also consider compliance. There are a lot of compliance requirements, as we've just heard, for cyber. Those should definitely be considered. COVID and other things particular to your business. How will these impact your organization overall, from the cost to the business? Indirect time perhaps needed for educating staff. Do you need to establish a center of excellence, or do you need some outside assistance? And how will you make sure your employees and subcontractors understand all those kinds of compliance requirements? So that should be something your business is thinking about going forward. Don't leave that compliance piece out. Another thing to do is to actually include compliance criteria as part of your go, no-go bid decision. So always use a standard matrix that includes compliance criteria that clearly document your black and white go, no-go requirements for your bid decision. That way everyone in your organization is clear internally on what those important compliance items are to your organization. Then they can collect the data needed for decision making, seek any approvals that may be needed, and it also allows you to document those decisions and have them written down so that you know why you made those particular decisions for that bid. It's also good practice to conduct iterative proposal compliance reviews along a set schedule, especially for those items that may be more difficult, unusual, or complex. In my world of cost and pricing, that's really important. It's very important to set deadlines for these difficult, unusual, complex compliance items so you have appropriate time to address them. You don't want to get to the end of a proposal and have missed something. Again, as a cost and price professional, there can be some very complex or unusual things. If you're having to create a new cost center, make a big change to your organization, you need to do those kinds of things early. And then lastly, definitely hold yearly reviews of your contracts to ensure understanding of compliance requirements. It's likely along the year that the management staff and internal support personnel have changed. So it's always imperative that you take time to review those contract compliance requirements. For example, if your contract requires everyone to have a security clearance, make sure that everybody understands that so you don't run afoul of your contract. But definitely go over those various compliance requirements for your contract.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Heather. Those are great points, as always, from you. And question over to you is, why engage a third party for compliance reviews of proposals?
Yeah, you all spend a lot of time and money getting your proposals together, and you don't want to lose because you made some kind of error or a subcontractor made an error in your response. A third party can really provide that fresh set of eyes around compliance, especially an external third party. So engaging third parties for reviews, for example, of your subcontractor sealed cost price proposals, or even your cost price proposal or your proposal itself, can catch items you may miss and help educate your subcontractors, as well as make sure that you're getting your subcontractors to a point where they're better partners in the future, because they're learning important lessons on how to be compliant that they may not be willing to talk to you about. But having that third party that they can speak to will, help them understand how they need to be compliant and make them a better partner for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. Always great to have you on our program, so appreciate the insight. Okay, and next up we have a longtime colleague and dear friend, Marcia Lindquist. I'm sorry we're running late here, Marcia, so appreciate your patience and waiting. Marcia's with Granite Leadership Strategies, and I'm going to move on to your best practices and give you the floor.
Thank you so much. A lot of my compliance best practices today really circle around the cost accounting part of life in the government contracting world, and a little bit in the proposal pricing area and the strategic parts of that proposal pricing that come into play. My first one is a basic. It's the accounting system adequacy compliance. Most contractors these days are being asked to fill out a disclosure that says whether they have an adequate accounting system, and the compliance for that follows along the lines of what's in the SF 1408 form. But the most important part of that most contractors fall down on is not getting their written policies and procedures in place. That will feed into the evaluation of the items in the SF 1408. Without the written policies and procedures in place, it's very hard for an auditor to determine whether you really are compliant or not. If you say that you have policies, but they're not written, then it's time to get out the keyboard and the screen and put them down so that they are written down. And what you stand for in the policies and how you carry out your accounting system in the procedures part of this. Very important part in order to get that accounting system adequacy compliance in order. The second is not very far from that. Incurred cost submittals are something that contractors who do cost reimbursable or flexibly priced contracts are required to do within 180 days of the end of their fiscal year every year. I usually tell my clients, even if they do not have cost reimbursable contracts, to prepare their incurred cost submittals anyway, because it lets you know what you're going to have to do when you do get a cost plus contract or a flexibly priced contract. It seems like a lot of work, but however, if you do it, you pretty much are ready for it when it comes time for you to do that. I think it's an important piece of a good, if you will, accounting and control compliance for you to do incurred cost submittals. I think it's very, very important to know what went into that, and it will point out the things that seem to fall apart for you during the year. It will allow you to tick and tie a lot of the information that's required in an incurred cost submittal. It will allow you to do everything from taking a look at your payroll information, all the way to taking a look at your contracts and whether you are compliant on those as well. The next one is one of my favorites these days. It's the cost estimating adequacy compliance. It's a big one these days, right along with the accounting system adequacy. Contractors are being asked for their cost estimating system and if it's been approved. A lot of the contractors that have come to me recently are asking for that, and frankly, it is not a walk in the park. It requires its own set of policies and procedures, and I say plus, plus, plus because there's a lot involved in that. There's a lot that you have to, if you go to the DFARS and you look for the cost estimating system requirements, you'll see there are 17 principles and criteria that have to be complied with. Everything from your system to the human parts of it to the policies and procedures. And like my colleagues in the last session talked about in terms of what's adequate and what's compliant, it's very, very important to have a three-legged stool here, going back to Catherine's point. And the three-legged stool for cost estimating adequacy is your system, be it manual or otherwise, if you will, or electronic in terms of Excel, but the policies and procedures are important. And then lastly, the plus, 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 the third plus is the human factors. The fourth part of this is preparation for CAS coverage. It's a great way to help you become compliant. A lot of contractors will say, well, I don't have to do CAS yet, and you're correct that you may not have to, but if you become CAS compliant, then you will be CAS compliant when it comes time for you, when you win that $50 million contract. Putting, again, the policies and procedures in place to be CAS covered is a great way to make sure that you are compliant and ready. Why not do it, excuse me, from the beginning before you have to actually do it? The fifth one here is provisional indirect rates annually. A lot of contractors are required to do that, again, if they have cost reimbursable contracts. Provisional indirect rates mean that you are allowed to bill those rates through to the contracts. In my opinion, again, prepare those indirect rate provisional rates ahead of time. Many of you are preparing them right now. A lot of you will delay getting that done, but if you're preparing your next fiscal year's indirect rates, you will be ready to submit those and bill for those. And even if you don't have the requirement to do it, it'll get the discipline in order for you to be compliant with doing provisional indirect rates. That's all I have from those 5 points, Jennifer.
Marsha, always love your great insights. Thank you for sharing your time to put those together. And what is the most repetitive compliance issue that you see?
Well, I was hard pressed to pick the most repetitive, but I'm going to go with price proposals that do not comply with the requirements of the RFP. What I see in that regard is that either proposals just throw over the transom the pricing and don't address what is in Section L and Section M. So if you do a compliance matrix each and every time you put together a price proposal and you lay out all of the different sentences and paragraphs that are in Section L and Section M, and you answer them not only in your narrative but in the data that you provide, you will be compliant. And most importantly, Jennifer, provide that compliance matrix in your proposal, even if you're not asked for it.
Great.
That's it, Jennifer.
I love that, Marsha. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thanks. Okay, last but not least, a good friend and longtime colleague as well, Ms. Karen Long, has joined us from Streamline Government Contracts. Karen, it's great to have you on our program, and I'll turn the floor over to you for your 5 best practices on compliance.
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. I really appreciate you inviting me here today. It's been very informative. I've listened from the beginning, so it's been a great bunch of speakers. So again, thanks. So again, Karen Long with Streamline Government Contracts. We are an outsourced solution for contract management support, and we will be celebrating our 9-year anniversary on Monday, October 4th. So excited about that.
Great.
So my main best practices are mostly dealing with reporting and tracking, and they're not in any specific order, but I'll go ahead and start with number 1 that you see on the screen, which is share contract briefs with the entire team. And first, let me say that the contracts brief should capture the deliverables for everyone. This means the technical team, HR, contracts, accounting, etc. needs to capture everything. And then what I mean by share it with the entire team is to share it with all the departments. This way, everyone is literally on the same page. And 2, for tracking of like the service contract report or small business subcontracting plan reporting, one technique, and the more contracts you have, the more helpful this is, but it's to set up an Excel worksheet where each worksheet represents a month of the year. And every time you get a new contract, you would add any reporting requirements to that specific worksheet. So for example, service contract reports, let's say you have those in 3 of the contracts. Those are due in October, prior to October 31st. So you would list those 3 contracts and mention that there's a service contract reporting due. And again, as you grow, the bigger you get, the more subcontracts and prime contracts you have, the more helpful this will be. And prepare estimates to completion for a limitation of funds. So estimates to completion will allow you to project ahead and to plan ahead. So this will ensure that with the limitation of funds clause, which means that you need to report, and it depends on the contract, but it's to report 30, 60, or 90 days ahead of time when you are projecting that you're gonna reach 75% utilization of funds, and sometimes it's 85% as well. At any rate, this will keep you on track and help you with the timely reporting. Use numbers and nomenclatures for NDAs, TAs, proposals. And this is pretty self-explanatory, but if you use numbers, it's very easy to track and to see if you're missing an NDA, if you're missing a TA, or if it didn't get fully executed. And for proposals, it will help you see whether the proposal you submitted is still valid or not, or whether you might have to extend the validity period in the near future. And last, and this is one of the most important, I'll say, and I think it's often overlooked, use a tracking sheet for resumes and candidates reviewed for labor, time and material contracts, or labor hour contracts, or really any contract that requires specific educational requirements and experience requirements for the people working. And what this helps is it helps track and keeps a centralized location for anybody that you have reviewed the resume for and you've confirmed that they meet the category requirements. And this is really helpful. What can happen is if someone doesn't meet the labor category requirements, even after the contract is over, the government or prime contract, and usually the prime contract would come back because the government's asking them, they don't meet the category requirements, you can be asked to pay back the difference between the labor category that they did meet and what you actually billed them at. So again, this is really important. And again, even when the contract or task order is over, remember that they can still come back and ask you for that information. And We generally, we have our own tracking sheet that we use for this at Streamline Government Contracts. We generally share this with our clients. However, I appreciate everybody's time, and especially, again, I know I'm the last speaker, so I really appreciate everybody who has stuck in there. And so feel free, if you're interested in this tracking sheet, to send me an email with the subject employee tracking sheet, and either me or my office manager, Scott, will send you our template.
Great, thanks, Karen. And we actually will have one more behind you from the government side, Andy Kirkpatrick from GSA, but you're the last rounding out compliance. I appreciate you hanging on the line, as well as all the other folks that are still with us. So quick question to you, how do you keep track of all your contract requirements and reporting so nothing slips through the cracks?
So what we do at Streamline is we prepare a monthly executive report. And what this forces you to do is to review each contract in depth every month. So again, I agree with what Heather said earlier about tracking what compliance requirements your contracts have. I would go a little bit further than she did and say this needs to be really reviewed on a monthly basis instead of an annual basis. As she mentioned, there are people who turn over during the year, etc. And as I tell our clients, you know, I can't keep everything in our head. So again, so we put together an executive report. What it includes is contract activity, comments, and recommendations. And in addition to being a good tracking mechanism, it's also an effective communication and historical record.
Great, thank you.
So thanks, Jennifer. And if anybody has questions or you're interested in getting more information, please reach out. And don't forget to request your tracking sheet. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. And thanks also to all of our sponsors. We still have one more speaker here up from the government, GSA. We've got Andy Kirkpatrick. But before I get to him again, I want to thank all of our great sponsors that made today's event possible. C3, Integrated Solutions. They were also a speaker covering CMMC. We've got Bit Solutions. They were a speaker, as was the Federal Business Council, BidSpeed, Ocean 5. And I think that was it for speakers. We also want to thank Boone Group, Government White Papers, Work Plan, SWIC Tech, FNB Bank, and thanks again, everybody, and thanks to our sponsors.